let me start from 9th April 1936, when in the Indian city of Lucknow, in a small hall called the Rifai Arm Hall, a remarkable gathering takes place. This is the first meeting of the All India Progressive Writers Association. Premchand, a lion in winter, he's going to die 3 months later, addresses this gathering. In his presidential address, he says, "Hame khubsurti ka mayar badalna hoga." He brings a long prepared speech called Sahitya ka Uddeshya, the pursuit of literature, in which he is at pains to tell his fellow writers that we have to change the way we look at beauty and by extension art. And he gives many examples, chief of them being a woman working in the field with sweat on her brow, tending a baby, nursing the child, and working in the field can also be a fit subject for literature. In the past 20-25 years, the kind of stories Premchand has been writing have been about socially purposive, socially engaged literature. And by Premchand coming there and addressing the gathering, he, as it were, puts the stamp of approval on what this bunch of young writers is trying to do. Let me go back in time a little. My whole thesis, the one that I've articulated in my book on the progressives, is that I don't see progressivism as an exotic hybrid plant that was brought by cosmopolitan bilingual people who had studied abroad, and a plant that they had grafted onto Indian soil. I see it as something that taps into existing currents of thought. I think Premchand's writings are a great example of what is already happening. But if we were to go back in time, if we were to go back to even 1857, I see even that as a momentous event which releases a burst of political energy. A political energy that finds expression in the kind of literature that is coming out. It is a very slow process, so it's difficult to pinpoint any one. Literary historians find it easy to call Angare, which comes out in December 1932, as the beginning of progressive thought. But I think if we were to do that, we are being unfair to what has already been happening in the 20, 30, 40 years before Angare comes along. You have a bunch of people who are talking about harnessing literature to social change. You have the coming together of the social reformer and the writer in an incredible sort of way. In Urdu, it is most obvious. Take the writings of Hari, a bestseller of its time, Miratul Urus. It is precisely about educating women, it's about inequality, it's about the unevenness in society. So you have a bunch of writers. I confine my remarks mostly to Urdu and to some extent to Hindi, but I understand that this is happening across India. I see it as a pan-Indian phenomena, the coming together of the reformer and the writer. So really, there is a kind of radicalism in the air. What the progressives are doing is tapping into that and giving it a kind of a structured, let's say, a formal, providing a platform. So from the inaugural conference of April 1936, we begin to see branches of the PWA, the Progressive Writers Association, opening in almost all the major cities across the length and breadth of India. There are very active branches in Amritsar, in Lahore, in Delhi, in Aligarh, in Calcutta, and so on. And it also goes into almost all the bhashas. So you have PWA units which are active in Bangla, in Marathi, in Telugu, and so on. Also, virtually from its inception, the progressives managed to get the support of literally the who's who. At the inaugural conference itself, you have Maulana Hasrat Mohani, you have Maulana Abdul Haq. These are all respected names, and Premchand, of course. In subsequent meetings, you have messages of solidarity coming in from Tagore, from Nehru for that matter, from Sarojini Naidu. So people across political dispensations are pledging their support to what the progressives are saying and wanting to do. And the fact is that nobody can really find fault with the message of the progressives. What are they essentially saying? They are saying that let's make common cause with all the major issues of our time. It could be anti-colonialism, anti-fascism, nationalism, feminism. It could be land reform, the need to abolish zamindari. It could be things that Premchand has been talking about, such as untouchability, such as very young girls being married off to older men, as Premchand has written about in Nirmala and so on. So all of these issues, the progressives are saying nothing is beyond the pale of literature. What is happening here is that there is a strong didactic element. There is an occasional hectoring, there is a wagging of finger. But like I say, this is the reformer and the writer coming together. And I think it is important and timely that the writer is pointing out the unevenness. As you know, there have always been two schools of thought, art for art's sake and art for life's sake. The progressives are saying it is the job of literature to hold up a mirror. And in that mirror, you must see everything that the world has to offer, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And this is something that the progressives are doing with great vim and vigor. In Urdu, there has always existed a form of poetry known as shehr-asho, lament of the city. Now, in the years of the late Mughal rule, the shehr-asho was largely self-piteous. There was a great deal of breastfeeding, there was a great deal of melancholia, there was a great deal of looking back at past glories. What the progressives are doing is anything but lamenting. These are anthems of resistance, these are songs of looking forward. In a purely literary sense, what is also happening is that there is some merit in the charge that is made against the progressives, that of bhakti adab, extreme topicality. Anything that happens both in the country and outside. And here let me say that the progressives are single-handedly responsible for bringing a certain cosmopolitanism into India. The Indian writers are no longer just writing about what is happening in the immediate sphere. Of course they are reacting to that, and the charge of topicality, of mawzu goi, of topicality, of bhakti adab, there is some merit. For instance, there is a naval uprising just off the shore of Bombay, which most people don't remember today, but the progressives write white heat about it. And this is something that will go on. The progressives are quick to respond to events outside India. I'm going to jump a little and come to 1961. Patrice Lumumba, the first duly elected Prime Minister of Congo, is assassinated in January 1961. Today we think something's happening in some African country, how does it bother us? But the progressives respond with white heat, and this is 61 when the PWA, as we understand it, has, as it were, gone into decline and sort of scattered to the wind. Sahir is writing, "Khoon phir khoon hai, टपकेगा तो जम जाएगा, जुल्म आखिर जुल्म है, बढ़ता है तो मिट जाता है. Blood after all is blood, when it drops it congeals. Injustice after all is injustice, when it increases it ends." So Faiz is writing, "Bol ke lab azad hain tere." Now these are things that are not confined to time and space. I hate to make the distinction between high and low literature. I try not to do that. But I think in the hands of gifted progressives, there were always instances of extreme topicality. Bol is written during Zia's time. But today, when Delhi University teachers sit on strike, they say Bol ke lab azad hain tere for their vice chancellors. Or the Honda motorcycle people in Gurgaon, when they sit on a strike, they say Bol ke lab azad hain tere. These things have transcended their time and their circumstance, and I think that is the great beauty of the progressives. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. Oh, good. Right, now, like I said, I have a lot of things to say, and you must forgive me, I am going to sound jumpy. Let me draw your attention to something that I call a radical populism. Let me come now to the Communist Party. Set up in 1925, it nevertheless has had an opening, as it were, much before that. By 1919, there is a flourishing bureau in Tashkent which is translating material, socialist Marxist material, into Urdu, into Marathi, into Bangla, and flooding India with very inexpensive, easily accessible, easily to be found in university towns and other places, these pamphlets. So from 1919 onwards, you have a steady stream of socialist Marxist literature available in all languages, certainly in Urdu. In 1911, you already have the Communist Manifesto translated into Urdu and published no less by Maulana Azad in a serialized fashion in Al-Hilal. This is 1911. So there is, in fact, there's a remarkable book, those of you who are interested, suggest that you read it. This is by Humayun Khizr Ansari, and it calls The Introduction of Socialist Thought in the Muslims of North India. Why he chooses Muslims is interesting because in the early years, both of socialist movements, cultural movements, left-leaning movements, we see a large number of Muslims, many of whom take to writing. They are kind of activist writers, but they have written things that are useful to us today. So this radical populism that we are talking about, this is fairly widespread. From the start of the first All India Progressive Writers Association in 1936, right up to the 40s and even the early 50s, for about 20 years, I would say, that the PWA holds an amazing, casts an amazing spell over the popular imagination. Ralph Russell, a scholar from SOAS, coming to India in the 40s, is struck by the fact that every Urdu writer he meets seems to be a progressive. Now, I think there is a distinction we need to make here between a small group which are hardliners who are ideologically sounder than the others, and a great many others. I don't have numbers to give you, but my own sense is that the greater number of progressives are actually fellow travelers. They have a kind of a woolly notion of communism per se, but they are willing to go along with a larger group because they see nothing in the progressive credo that seems to be against their own views. Nationalism is a big thing for the progressives, and this is something that nobody really can go against. Feminism, and like I said, anti-colonialism, anti-fascism, all of that. Ijaz Ahmed has called the PWA a hegemonic ideological force. And there is some merit in this insofar as that the influence that the progressives, and by extension the party whole-timers within the progressive movement, the influence that they exercise over large numbers of people is not commensurate with their actual numbers. The ideological group within the PWA demands an ideological purity from a group that is sort of, let's say, fluid, for want of a better word. We see a trend of people willing to go along with it right up to the 40s, but we see 1943 as a year that marks some changes. We see a certain group within the progressive writers becoming a little, let's say, uncomfortable with, for example, inviting someone like Comrade Dange to the Bombay Conference in 1943. 43 is important because IPTA is formed, and from the 40s onwards, it becomes a kind of a sort of sister organization. The IPTA is the Indian People's Theatre Association. It is formed in response to the Great Bengal Famine. An Urdu poet, Vamir Jaunpuri, writes a poem called Bhuka Hai Bengal, Bengal is hungry, and this becomes a rally cry for the IPTA. No study of the progressives can be complete without an understanding of the work of P.C. Joshi and how P.C. Joshi, as General Secretary, as General Secretary of the CPI, is quick to seize upon the possibilities that literature holds and how culture can be used as a tool. And P.C. Joshi is doing many interesting things. You know about his commissioning of the photographs of the famine. You know about his commissioning of Sunil Jana to travel to Telangana, to Bengal to take photographs, and how the image begins to tell 1,000 stories. And this is P.C. Joshi's great contribution, is his encouragement of the squads of the IPTA. From the 40s, Bombay becomes a kind of the high noon of the progressive movement is really witnessed by the progressives in Bombay. And in Bombay, you have the film industry, where a great many Urdu speakers and writers have come from the different kasbas and cities across India, come to seek work. So you have the film industry, you have the Bombay branch of the Progressive Writers Association, and you have IPTA forming 3 interlinked circles with common memberships. We come to, I'm running out of time, so I'll come to 1947. You know about the party's call of freedom being a false freedom. This causes some disarray. The progressives break into different groups. Sajjad Zahir is sent to set up the Communist Party in Pakistan. It leaves Sardar Jafri to hold the flock, which is dwindling in numbers. And then there is a certain group within the progressives that says that our purpose was to achieve independence. We have achieved that. What more is there for us now? There are others within the progressives who respond to Nehru's call for nation building. When Nehru is saying, let the temples of modern India be the dams and the factories and the universities and colleges, the progressives are responding to that. And the film lyricists, whom I hold very highly, I think they did a great job in spreading ideas of all kinds into the nooks and crannies of the popular imagination. You have Sahil saying, "Chodo kal ki baatein, kal ki baat purani, aao likhe nayi kahani." Let's forget about the past and let's write a new story. You have Khwaja Ahmad Abbas, an unabashed Nehru admirer all his life, standing up and saying, no, let's join the national movement, let's get on with the business of building the nation. So you have all of these currents happening at a time. Also, remember that the years immediately after independence are a time where India is rocked by strikes and chakka jams, and there are many people who are writers within the progressive fold who are saying that no, this is not really what we had wanted. While Faiz is saying, "Ye daag daag ujala, ye shab gazida seher, ye wo seher to nahi tha intezar jiska." Faiz is talking about this patchy light, this uneven morning, that this is not the morning we had hoped for. But there are great many progressives who are saying, no, 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 this is what we had hoped for. This is what we had worked for. And now we must get on with the business of nation building. I've run out of time, so I'm going to take questions from you now.